PVR Inox is losing money. In fact, the multiplex operator reported a consolidated net loss of 333.35 crore for the quarter ending March 2023. Now, such is the magnitude of the losses that the company plans to shut down approximately 50 cinema screens over the course of next 6 months. Its competitors are no better. Carnival Cinemas is debt-ridden. Cinepolis India reported a reduced footfall of over 20% as compared to pre-COVID levels. Experts say that high volatility observed in Hindi movie performances is the pain point. But Hindi movies are just not doing well, and that's just one part of the story. On the show today, what's hurting multiplex business in India? What's the future of cinema consumption amid OTT boom? And how have consumers' trend panned out in movie and cinema consumption at large? Joining me at this point in time is Karan Taurani, who is the media and entertainment analyst and senior VP at Elara Capital. With me in the studio are my colleagues Soumalya, Santikari and Kartik Malhotra. Gentlemen, appreciate you all taking time out. Before we discuss what's the future of media and consumption looking like, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Newsline. I want to come to you first, Soumalya. This is a domain you've been studying for a while. What we are seeing perhaps is something that's been happening. It's been in the pipeline since COVID and after COVID. All multiplexes, major cinemas have reported losses.
Yeah, Shweta, thanks for having me on the show. The COVID, just like for the travel industry, came as a rude disruption for the cinema movie exhibition business, and as a result of that disruption, we saw two giants merging, PVR and Inox, coming together, and the entire cinema viewing experience obviously got hit because people, due to the advent of OTT, people and the pandemic-induced restrictions, consumption pattern changed, and as a result, the Q4 results, as we are seeing, which was announced yesterday, massive 333 crore loss. So it shows the kind of pressure that these movie exhibitors are facing, and obviously the major point of is also because some of the recent Bollywood blockbusters, they have failed to live up to expectations, barring Pathan, which has been a saving grace for the business of cinema.
Okay, I want to come to business of cinema, but keeping a firm eye on PVR Inox, Kartik, operating a loss of about 333 crore, 3 times jump from what it reported in the last quarter. What's the strategy for PVR Inox?
Shweta, sorry, I'll take a slightly different view to this whole debate, and I feel while, yeah, OTT has eaten the cake and the cream and the cherry on top of that for most entertainment industries, including exhibition cinema, I don't think the story is all that grim.
Okay. See,
we've got to see it in the sequence of events, and the large story here being that PVR and Inox came together and merged into this one rock-solid entity, 1700 screens across the country. And obviously, as way of business operations, you do your cost-benefit analysis. There are certain movie theaters, 50 of them apparently, as per the statement of the company, which are not doing great business. Okay. It makes eminent business sense to shut them down. But is this action being taken on account of losses? In fact, quite the reverse. In fact, in the same statement, the company is saying that it intends to open 172 screens this year. Last year, 168 new screens opened by PVR. So overall, the market is growing. Okay. At the cost of course, sounding a little too optimistic, even though you look at the growth pattern, OTT is expected to grow at a 14-15% CAGR. Movie theaters, according to an EY report published with data of last year, suggests that even the theater business will grow by a CAGR of about 9.2% or so.
Let's pull up those data points.
The story is not that grim. And why did the company account for such huge losses? That's because they accelerated depreciation on these 50 theaters, which they are planning to shut down in the next 6 months. They took it on their books and accelerated depreciation and removed the written down value completely, brought it to zero. So that sort of augmented the loss figure.
Absolutely.
But overall, it doesn't seem like, the curtains are actually down on showbiz yet.
Okay, let's ask Karan that. Karan, Kartik here believes that it's not too bad, that in fact what PVR Inox is doing is that it's looking to, cut out its losses, it's put them on the books, essentially closing down on theatres that are not making money, but also going big on opening new theatres, new cinema screens across the country. So it's a planned strategy and not a reflection of how showbiz business is doing.
Yes, absolutely. Hi, firstly, good afternoon, and thanks for having me on the show. So just to give you some idea here in terms of where things are moving, the movie industry or the cinema business rather is that of high operating leverage. So if you look at their costs, the fixed costs are very high in terms of nature. So the moment you see a drop in occupancy, you see a significant negative impact in terms of overall profitability. Now, two, three things that have not turned in their favor in the post-COVID era. One is, of course, the footfall recovery, which is of utmost important. So footfall recovery on a like-to-like basis, if you take the same number of screens last year versus this year, it's been only towards about 70% for FY23, and this is despite cinemas opening up without restrictions, everything put together, because FY23 saw the resurgence, after the pandemic. So that is one reason which has been a big negative surprise, and that's primarily due to the content. So you have not seen small, medium budget content doing well. It is only the larger films that are faring well. Larger films are gaining traction. They are getting a higher share of the box office. But small, medium budget content films remain to be a big laggard. So that's one reason. The second reason is that you have a very high fixed cost base right now. So the kind of rental, there is a massive amount of inflation. So I think because of this entire rental issue that is there, the costs have actually escalated, and because occupancy is not come back, there's a negative impact in terms of profitability again. The third point to make is that, as I told you, cinema, because it's a high operating leverage business, one major factor here is that advertising revenue has not come back. So if you look at the key advertising revenue, it's close to 9 or 10% of the overall revenue. That has not come back to pre-COVID level. It has only come back to 60% of pre-COVID levels rather. So that flows down to your EBITDA. So because your ad revenues not come back, because footfalls have not come back, because your fixed costs are now elevated at a very high level as compared to what they were about 3 years back, you are seeing an issue with profitability. And the only way to address this issue is two. One is, of course, you expect that the content comes back on track, people start doing in larger numbers, small, medium budget content really picks up. That is not under your control, right? The second controllable element that you have is some kind of breaching around the cost. So I think what they will do going ahead is that they will probably shut loss-making properties or low-margin properties. They will try and reduce the rental cost. Wherever the economics are not sustainable, they'll try and scale it down. They will try and reduce other overheads which are there. So I think that is the only controllables which they are working right now over the near term, because in the near term also we do not see any kind of respite, for Hindi box office making a sharp bounce back. You might see a film doing well once in 2 months or once in 3 months, but that's not good enough to compensate for the losses for the other months which are there. So I think a consistent recovery in Hindi box office is a very big contributor here if the profitability for cinema chains were to come back on track.
Okay. I want to quickly get your sense on how's the footfall been post-pandemic. Has it improved? Because, going to what other competitors of PVR are reporting, Carnival and Cinepolis, they have seen a decreased footfall to the point of 20% post-COVID. So essentially, footfall here not at par with what it was, or people not really coming out to watch as many movies as they were prior to pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. I think that data point is more or less correct. So our assessment is that footfalls are down close to 28 to 30% versus pre-COVID levels. And this is primarily, a mix. So the content performance has been very volatile. So when the cinemas opened up last year in the month of April, May, June, there was a very big pent-up demand. And there was also very compelling content. RRR, KGF, 2, you had Bulbulaya. I mean, people were really, wanting to go to cinema chains in large numbers because they had not been there without restrictions for the last 1.5 years since the pandemic had struck. So the only point is that the reason why footfalls recovered very sharply in that particular quarter last year, I think last year in April, May, June quarter, the footfall recovered towards 92% of pre-COVID levels. So the entire sharp recovery which was there in footfall was obviously because of content doing well. A lot of large budget films that actually were very good in content. People wanted to go in large numbers, and also a pent-up demand. I think post that we have seen very dismal quarters because the content has been poor. Now, content has been poor because of multiple reasons. I mean, it could be, primarily because of the audience, behavior change in the post-COVID era, where they've got exposed to a very huge variety of content on the platforms. People have already consume dub films on TV and on OTT platforms, so they don't want to watch the same Hindi remake of South films, right? And plus, a lot of this Hindi content which has come in the last, 1 year or so, has actually been conceptualized during COVID or pre-COVID times as well. So the kind of stories that they're seeing right now, the audience can't relate to it. So COVID led to a permanent disruption in terms of the change in behavior, taste of the consumer, and the content production houses haven't been able to adopt to that matter. Over and above that, I think the bigger negative surprise here is that you have still seen films like Brahmastra, Drishyam 2, star-driven films or Pathan rather, which have done well in terms of box office. But you haven't seen a single medium budget film doing very well. So if you look at films by Ayushmann Khurrana, Vicky Kaushal, they are the ones who are making small medium budget film in the pre-COVID era. And those films were a big driver for box office. So if you look at the contribution in terms of box office is concerned, close to 60% of your box office revenue was from small medium budget content. Today that number has come to 15 to 20% because the kind of footfall decline small medium budget content has reported, it is as high as 60 to 70% as compared to larger films where it is in the range of about 20 to 25%. So the entire pain that we are seeing in terms of footfall recovery or the laggard versus the pre-COVID times is because of small medium budget content. And it is also the content which is an issue, but it is also the consumption pattern. So the audience has realized that because the film does not have a big star, because the film does not have any compelling in terms of the nature of content they're offering, because the film is not large scale in nature, I can do the content on OTT platform after 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Or I can do it through pirated content. So people are not going frequently to watch these kind of films and actually paying ticket prices as compared to what they would do in the pre-COVID times.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of what's happening post-COVID is that one is, and this is an assumption that the content is not what people would like to consume. So as pointed out by Karan, that the small budget movies are not getting as much traction as they used to prior to COVID. And another point being that cinemas and production companies have not really adapted to the consumption pattern post-COVID, where people are refusing to see movies which are remake. Number one. Number two, it's easier to sit at home, and this is where OTT comes in, easier to sit at home and watch the same movie on the OTT platform a month later, as opposed to going out, exposing yourself to COVID or whatever residual of COVID as we know of, and spend a lot of money.
So, look at the opportunity cost. You go to a theatre, a PVR Inox theatre, let's say a family of 3 typically in urban India, you end up spending about 1200, 1500 rupees only on the ticket and perhaps 1 bucket of popcorn. Honestly, I haven't been to a theatre in a while, so I don't remember if my numbers are accurate or not. But you're definitely spending in the range of, let's say, about 1500 rupees or so.
For 4 people, you're spending...
For three people, at least,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Including parking, fuel and everything
I watched
else
a
that
movie
goes
this
with it.
Sunday. You are bang on your numbers. Absolutely.
Now, how do you see this 1500 rupees? It can get you another full-fledged annual subscription of an OTT platform and maybe yet another half-year subscription or so. Typically, subscriptions being priced at about 1000 rupees or so. So the point is, in the pre-COVID era, and COVID again, not just being a health hazard, being a great disruptor in the consumption trends and consumption behavior that we saw evolve over those 2 years or so. What really happened was that, you became very accustomed to watching content that you desire to watch after sampling maybe tens of different content pieces and hooking on to something that can engage you. Whether it's a movie, whether it's a web series, whether it is English language, Hindi language, regional languages, international languages, OTT has pretty much sort of, broken all those barriers that existed for the traditional moviegoer. Right. So that has changed drastically.
Absolutely.
Now, of course, there are multiple strategies that can be and should be adopted. Now, if directors and producers and production houses knew as a formula what will work in the box office, they would have been producing that content already. Unfortunately, nobody has that magic wand.
Nobody's cracked that.
Nobody has,
formula.
and you
Yes.
continue to crack it, and you crack it twice, 3 times over, and then the market cracks you.
Absolutely.
Right. So that is one. Second, this whole strategy of de-risking. Before a movie is released in the theaters, the digital OTT rights are already sold. The music rights are already sold. So I remember back in the mid 90s, early 90s maybe, there was this huge lobby of movie makers, production houses, big ticket producers who took a very conscious decision that we will not release a VHS version of the movie. Let it run its course in theaters. Those strategies are absent right now. So your movie will hit the theater, it'll get consumed for a month, 2 months maybe, it'll willy-nilly make its way into OTT. So unless you're a real fan, unless you have really waited long for that star or that director or that movie to release, it's unlikely you will make that effort and spend that money and that opportunity cost to go spend 3 hours on the risk on whether you will like it, not like it. You can't switch off, you can't pause, you can't do any of those other things you've become accustomed to.
Very interesting point you said there, which is in case unless you are a fan and unless it's a big superstar, it's very unlikely, and which is what Karan was also alluding to, it's very unlikely that your movie is going to perform, which is what is happening at this point in time. And Soumalya can come in there. Soumalya, we have seen movies that have driven audience regardless of whether they were good movies or bad movies, just solely on the basis of who the main actors or actresses were, which works very well if it's a mega star, but it doesn't really work for small budget films.
No, absolutely. And small budget films, especially, I mean, due to the popularity of OTT platforms and the format which they are showcased, I think they have also benefited with the sense that they are getting a wider audience compared to a limited shelf life at the box office counters. And I also agree with Kartik that those days of hackneyed plots and remaking South movies, they are gone. I mean, we've seen the example of Kartik, who is a heartthrob of the nation, but his recent movie tanked at the box office because it was a remake of a South Indian movie which is already, which is dubbed version is already running on satellite TV. So, and it's a frame by frame copy. Even dialogues have been copied in Hindi. So the public will not be fooled by that anymore. They want value for their money. As Kartik said, that going to a movie hall with a family of 4, it sets you back by at least 2,000, 2,500 rupees. So they want value for the money, and
unless it's a Salman Khan.
Unless it's even Salman Khan movies. Even
But you have your misgivings with Kisi Ka Bhai, Kisi Ki Jaan.
Look at that. I mean, just because it's a Salman Khan movie, it minted only 110 crores. If you take Salman Khan out of that movie,
I hear you talking about the movie every day.
Yeah, I used to see the box office numbers, and obviously it's a fact check for him also, and he should also course correct now that his movie is not living up to the billing.
But I think we should look at the OTT spends also.
Absolutely.
If you look at the pie chart which you were just playing,
yes.
A chunk of content, and content being the most expensive asset that that get acquired by OTT platforms. Look at the data here. They're spending almost half their costs on acquiring film rights.
Absolutely.
So obviously,
and originals as well.
Originals is the next bet, right?
Yes.
It's the next bet. But 50%, 44% or so is actually on pure acquisition of film rights. So that is burning a hole in the pockets of the OTT, but it is also helping them garner more subscriptions, more subscribers. Look at the other set of data. In fact, OTT has got about 45 million households with 99 million subscriptions. On an average, each household of these 44 million households has got more than 2 OTT subscriptions. You already got this. You've paid for this in advance. It's like a prepaid card, right? You've paid for all this content and the content which is going to get populated on these platforms over the entire next year. You've already paid for that in advance. So why would you actually make the effort of going to a movie screen and consuming the forced calories in addition to maybe not some very good cinema?
And Shweta, those days of silver jubilees have vanished at the box office. A movie at the most runs for 4 weeks in a hall because of a tight release schedule, and anyway, after a certain point of time, if a movie is not a super duper hit like Pathan, it will come on the OTT platform within 4 weeks, within 5 or 6 weeks of the release. So people in general are willing to wait for that time and watch
That
it
is
from the confines of their home.
That is true. In fact, this is interesting because we also briefly touched on South Indian cinema, and 2021-22 was the year of South Indian cinema. So from an RRR to KGF to Pushpa, mega hits. About 62% of all India box office collection came solely from South Indian cinema, and that's where Hindi movie production houses or directors, producers thought they've cracked it. They're going to remake and that's going to be a blockbuster. But recent trends have shown that that's also failed.
So that's what I think, you crack the formula, you think you've cracked it, you continue your stabs at it for a while until it sort of stabs you back. So, you can't have too much repetition of the same formula for the end. What are you watching this content for? For entertainment, right? You can't watch the same show, the same movie or a similar plot or a similar environment over and over again. But I think the fact of the matter still is that numbers suggest, and the bet that PVR and Inox are making on these increased screens, it suggests, or at least the industry watchers would hope, that movie business is not going to shut down. It is still experiential at some level.
Right.
At some level, it is still an outing for families, right? So, so that is why the number of screens will continue to grow till as much time as PVR Inox and other players, Metropolis, Cinepolis, etc., they understand that maybe the threshold has been reached, and this is the total number of screens that are required in a country of our size, of our population, to serve people who are really interested in going to cinemas. And of course, in smaller cities, metros, again, this competition between OTT and movie theaters is going to be ripe for the foreseeable future because of entry of low-cost smartphones, cheapest data in the world, 5G penetration. All this is only going to augment the case for consumption on the small screen rather than on the large screen.
But Kartik, I want to point out that Ajay Devgan, who is one of the biggest stars in the country, he also runs in a movie exhibition business, and he and a lot of other people have gone on record saying that India, given its size, is underprinted in terms of large cinema screens. They need more cinema screens.
Agreed, which is what I'm saying, that it will continue to grow till as long as that equilibrium is arrived at. That this is the total demand for movie goers, and this is the total number of seats and cinemas.
But you need quality content to drive them to the screens.
Absolutely.
That is correct. And let's bring Karan in at this point in time. Karan, what is the strategy looking like for exhibitors and for production houses? I think what we are arriving at here is that nothing beats good content, and unless you have, and even if you have smaller movies, smaller budget films and cinema with solid content, with a good storyline, good plot, there is word of mouth that works big in favor of cinema, especially in India, but that hasn't really happened. So nothing beats good content therein.
Yes, absolutely. I think the path ahead is very clear that, remakes of Bollywood films, remake of South films will not work for Hindi producers, or production houses rather. We have to move towards more original content. We have to make large-scale content, but we also have to make very good story content. In the case of small, medium budget films, which are not doing well currently, right? And a lot of habits, taste has changed. So I think things have to be aligned to that as well. It's a cyclical industry. We have seen this trend in the past as well. 5 years ago, when we saw that Bahubali 2 was the only hit, and those for 3-4 months, all these large star-driven films actually reported a very sharp decline in terms of box office collections as compared to their averages. And then came back the likes of Ayushmann Khurrana, Vicky Kaushal kind of actors, which did phenomenally well with storytelling kind of concepts. And the films were actually blockbusters in terms of the ROI and the revenue they recover. So I think it is all about creating franchise. The Hindi film industry has to reinvent itself in terms of creating franchise. Globally, if you look at the box office industry, it is all run by franchise, whether you call it Fast and Furious, whether you call it Avatar, whether you call it Spider-Man, Marvel kind of films. I think that kind of content needs to come in, original content, franchise-driven content. And we are somewhere moving towards that path. If you look at franchise films like KGF, Pushpa, Bhul Bhulaiya, if you look at Pathan, if you look at Ekta Tiger, which is Tigers in the sequel. So I think franchise-based films need to be created so that we can really go at a large scale. not only in India, but also in the global markets. Because if you look at our box office revenue, we get only 10% of our revenues from the global markets. And there's a huge opportunity which is there because ticket prices are primarily very high over there. So I think that's one trend, creation of original content franchise, not just pure remakes. Second strategy rather is that, there has to be a blend of Hindi and South, right? So I think you'll probably see more films wherein you have got the lead actors from Hindi film industry and lead actors from South industry coming into a film. What that does is that it gets you a larger target audience, right? So you'll have a very high recall for that kind of a film in South as well as the North circuit, right? So if you look at Hindi films, generally they haven't fared that well in the South circuit. So even Salman, Shah Rukh, all these large actors, they are there. Not more than 3-4% of collection of their films comes from the dub versions. It is more driven by the Hindi language. As far as South is concerned, we have seen a good acceptance of South content in the Hindi circuits. If you look at films like Kantara, RRR, KGF, on an average, close to 40% of their collections come from the dub language versions. So acceptance of Hindi content
Karan,
in South is
I
very,
want to
very
quickly
important.
bring in Kartik on Southern content, because we've talked extensively, Kartik, on the rise and dominance of Southern content and how there is an increased intake of Southern cinema, and not just big films but also very small budget Southern films, alluding to the fact that, as I mentioned, good content fares better than big production houses making marvelous big movies that end up not getting them as much as returns as in case of Brahmastra, for that matter, a very big movie, produced and directed over years and years, but you have a Southern film coming in and that sort of topples and changes the way we see industry performing.
But I think these are not mutually exclusive. I think if you look at a film like RRR, it is as big as it gets. It is as large as it gets, right? You've got superstars, you've got great animation, you've got magnum opus sets. It's nothing like what our traditional imagination of Southern cinema was, that, it's a bunch of people dancing around trees. It doesn't happen anymore, neither in Bollywood nor in South.
Absolutely.
So I think this whole surge of Southern cinema has again come on the back of the audience being more receptive to consuming content across languages. Now, obviously, you don't understand the language, but with dubbing options, with subtitles, with all of those paraphernalia added, consumption of language other than a language that you are used to consuming content in, or your mother tongue for simplicity, has found a great market, not just in India but globally. And that is what has actually at some level been responsible for Natu Natu to also go ahead and win the Oscars. So I think this whole Southern surge is a new revolution that has fired up imagination of not just South India, but all regional pockets across the country, that great content, no matter what language, has the ability to break barriers.
Absolutely. And we've extensively, in fact, documented that in one of our documentaries, Kartik.
That's right. So I think the audience who's with us and consuming this show should immediately hop onto News 9 Plus, download the app and discover all the content we've done on Southern cinema.
And the rise of Southern cinema therein. Before I wrap this up, I want to come to you, Shweta. Interesting sort of a foray of Indian, small to big budget movies that are lined up in the year ahead. The pipeline, as you mentioned this morning, looks strong.
Yeah, the pipeline looks strong, but at the end of the day, we also have to keep in mind that job losses, shrinking pay packets, these are also going to have an impact on the consumption pattern of people in our country. With the current macroeconomic headwinds that we are presently staring at, you cannot have people who are losing jobs or having their pay packets shrink. They're going to go out and watch movies. Obviously, OTT is another platform, but at the end of the day, content and star power will rule the roost.
But if I am a movie goer and if I'm a movie bluff, what all should I be waiting for? What's in the pipeline?
Well, if you're a Bollywood fan, then obviously you have to wait for Tiger 3. That is going to hit the screens on Diwali.
Okay.
That is one biggie that everyone should be watching out for, because that's a part of the YRF universe. And as Karan said, that the franchise way is a format that Bollywood is trying to experiment with, and YRF has seen success in that format.
And Pushpa 2 as well?
Pushpa, yes.
I am told by movie bluffs in my PCR that Pushpa 2 is releasing as well. All right, gentlemen.
And Flash. Flash on 16th of June, Mission Impossible
And there you go.
28th of July. So
A lot to look forward to.
these are movies that I'm definitely going to the theaters for.
Absolutely.
So.
A very good mix of Hindi, English, Southern movies that are going to come in and hopefully reverse what we are seeing as losses for all movie exhibitors at this point in time. We will of course have to wait and watch out for that. Karan, Shomalo, thanks very much for joining with your inputs on that very important story.